lovely, beautiful Bess biplane, designed by Charles Wood, 1953. Built by Don Ross and flown by John Wild. This airplane certainly captured my imagination, and the look on the boy's face flying it says it all. Another passion of mine, rubber-powered model airplanes. All of the airplanes in this rack are scratch-built from plans. This one has a hand-carved folding wooden propeller. Let's take the beautiful Bess down, put it together, take a look at it. This book was recommended to me by my old friend and mentor, Bill Brenchley. Don Ross's very comprehensive book on building rubber-powered free flight model airplanes. I said before he was my mentor and the one that taught me to fly radio control models. By mentor, I meant mostly building. He taught me how to build and taught me the love of building and flying free flight model airplanes. When you immerse yourself in that part of model building, kind of takes you back, to me it does anyway, to where it all originated. It gets involved, which is something I very much enjoy. These notes here, I have notes on all these models because I'm just into so many different aspects of the hobby, but like this model, how much rubber, how's it trimmed. This particular one is right climb, right glide. Believe it or not, here's the motor for this model. This is a big rubber band powered free flight model airplane. It's the biggest one that I have. It's actually a pretty impressive model. So I'm looking at my notes here and getting out the rubber motor for it. What does this model take? 16 strands of 1/4 inch rubber. So it's a little easier to tie up and handle. I have them marked on these clothespins. Each one of these are 8 strands of 1/4 inch rubber, making up 16, and it's 28 inches long total. So you can imagine it's what they call a hank of rubber when you put that inside a model airplane and fly it. So we're talking lubricating the motors, stretch winding them. You make up the motors, you break them in. So you stretch the rubber, it's all in the book to get the best performance and life out of the rubber. Stretch the rubber, lube it before you ever wind it up and fly it. So fascinating aspect of the hobby. Let's look at some of the details. It's a little closer look at what's going on here with this beautiful Bess. Let's start with the prop and the nose block. This is a 16-inch folding balsa wood prop. The nose block is made from hard balsa, a little mahogany dressing up the nose, a little plywood for drilling, and some durability drilling and self-tapping screws in here. The hinge, it's got 2 angles to it, this way and this way, to get the blades to fold flat. And it's made from some aluminum and solid copper wiring. So that's all made up and figured out before you cut the prop, the hinges. And this is simply red thread. It's called whipping. That's attaching the hinge components to the balsa wood prop. For the folding action, got these two rubber bands on these small pins. Just provides the spring tension, causes it to fold and stay against the side of the plane. So we have a hook here on the prop shaft, runs through the nose block up to this drive dog. There's a set screw on the drive dog, the flat on the ground on the prop shaft, with a drive pin going into the center of the folding prop. In here we have a spring, a couple washers, and a small piece of copper tubing with a thrust ball bearing behind that. And that spring tension is calculated versus when the rubber motor is wound pulling this way. It compresses up against the thrust washer, and the hook clears this stop screw right here. It's in the nose block. So the motor's running, it clears this. At some point as it unwinds, the motor relaxes, hits the stop screw, the prop folds. The back of the nose block is the plate, so it's an adjustable nose block versus putting balsa wood shims and tilting your nose block. And these screws, the holes underneath them screws are big enough to move this plate around, and there's a conical shaped hole drilled through to clear the prop shaft. And then I have markings, crosshair markings in pencil on the nose block, and I got scribe lines on the plate for reference for adjusting my down and right thrust. So a lot going on the front of the plane with the folding prop and the nose block. The prop is colored with yellow RIT dye with a thin coating of clear on it. Gives that nice transparent coloring so you can see the grain of the wood. And here is a block of balsa wood for another free flight airplane I'm building. So that's what you start with when you're carving a prop like this. The nose cone is red paint, and same for the wing pylon. It's red paint. And balsa wood wheels, this is done with red RIT dye, same as the prop. These are inflatable Trexler tires. Take the air pump, put the needle in the tube coming out of the sidewall, inflate your tire, grab the tube, twist the stem or tube, and wrap the stem around the wheel, between the wheel and the tire, give it another twist, and that holds the pressure between the rim and the tire. This is all balsa wood construction, some of it very light balsa wood, like these are 32nd balsa wood ribs, and it is not covered in tissue, which does not last very long. This is a material called light span, which simulates tissue, so it's transparent. See the structure through it. Has the appearance of tissue, but lasts much longer, and not much of a penalty in weight over tissue. So this covering has no adhesive on the back as far as ironing it down. What you have to do is use balsa-rite and a small brush, and that means you only have the adhesive brushed on the exact surfaces where you want your covering to stick to, so you're saving weight that way. The pilot figure is simply a ping pong ball painted up on a block of foam, so very lightweight, just sized so it squeezes in the cockpit. Of course, I have a helmet painted on the pilot and a scarf like the pilots in the old days, the open cockpits, scarf flying behind them. It has a dashboard, gauges in it, a couple knobs, mahogany dashboard, windshield, which is nothing more than plastic with some black pinstripes, rubber tubing for the combing around the cockpit, piece of foam for the headrest. Simple, lightweight, looks nice. This is per my friend Bill Brenchley's suggestion, and he called it the Whimsical Man. It's something you do on a whim. This plane needs a pilot figure. Here's a simple, lightweight construction method. The first rubber-powered model airplanes had a rear wooden peg. The rubber motor went around. This is a rear tube. The reason for that is we put a pin through here for the stooge to hold it. And you say, what is a stooge? Well, if I ask you to hold on to the back of my plane while I stretch wind my rubber motor, I just need some stooge to hold it. So here's a video of my stooge set up outside. Here is the stooge set up, ready for stretch winding. Got the beautiful Bess in there. Got the guy wires going to the ground. Screwdrivers holding the center post. Guy wire out the front. And I have all my tools needed for winding on little nails here, hanging on these little nails. They're all marked. Nose block and prop, wire hook and blow tube. The winding takes place in a certain order. There's my blow tube, my transfer wire. Here's my winder on this side. And the torque meter. So the back part here, we have a pin going through the airplane. It's going through the aluminum tube that goes through the plane. The back peg, it's not a peg anymore, it's an aluminum tube. So I'll do a winding video in a separate video. And here is the rubber motor on the stick that I'm going to use to put the motor into the airplane. So that all has to go into the airplane. Quite the operation. Pretty much can't be done without a stooge. Moving on to the back of the plane. Spin it around here. This has an adjustable rudder. Instead of gluing the rudder with a slight adjustment and re-breaking it and gluing it, I have this piece of aluminum strap screwed into the rudder and a little nylon screw. It's aluminum tap versus nylon screw, and it's captured with a little pin that's glued into that nylon screw. So as I spin this screw in or out, I get adjustment on the rudder. This has a full flying horizontal stabilizer with a de-thermalizer. See the gap in here? So this is aluminum tube inside a tube with this body clip holding together, and a little metal spring right here that actuates it. So the reason for the full flying stabilizer is for the de-thermalizer. So this spring underneath that pin wound around the aluminum tube and tucked under that pin right there will actuate the horizontal stabilizer to kick up when the timer goes off for the de-thermalizer. Have a bead fishing line through it running down through this aluminum guide tube. Fishing line runs through another guide up to this bead, which has a small rubber band around it, and that just provides spring tension to hold the stabilizer down against the adjustable stop right here. Talk about that later. But when I set this timer going, it will release this rubber band and the horizontal stabilizer will pop up. So I'm going to start the timer so you can see the slot in the timer. When that rotates, starts ticking around rotating, it'll release the rubber band and the de-thermalizer will activate. So let's put the timer going. Push it forward. Hear it ticking. Come back up here. It releases, puts the plane into a hard stall, drops it down out of a thermal, just parachutes down. So that's the de-thermalizer setup, KSB de-thermalizer Tommy timer, I think they call them. Releases that. That pops up, and what I have here is the adjustment for flight trim. So nothing more than a wooden peg glued in here with a round wooden disc. I just kept adding glue and drilling out the disc till I got a snug fit on that wooden pin. And you simply rotate this to get your setting. You can see my mark where I've trimmed the plane at. When we pull this down, so I'm going to pull on the string to put it back on the de-thermalizer. Just show you the action here. Goes down, holds against that stop. If I rotate that in the right position, it's aligned with my mark. Then it releases for the de-thermalizer action. So here is the timer, de-thermalizer timer, and I think the change of color is 1-inch increments. So that's beautiful vest, a 38-inch rubber-powered free flight airplane. You can see already there's a bit to it. The deep dive of rubber-powered free flight. And we haven't even talked about how we're going to get this motor in the fuselage on the rear peg, tube in this case, on the stooge or blast tubes. This motor wound up, if it breaks inside that fuselage without a blast tube, it's blowing them out to pieces. Haven't talked about wire hooks, transfer the blast tube on and off the rubber motor, get it out of the plane, off the motor, or torque meters, homemade torque meters calibrated in inch ounces. You can wind a motor by counting turns, or you can go by torque. Haven't talked about winders or stretch winding, lubricate the motor, and we haven't talked about crocket hooks. How do you transfer a fully wound motor inside the plane off of the winder and onto the nose block, and then release that baby into the air, commit it to the skies, all based on your preset trims to fly up, catch a thermal, maybe trip the de-thermalizer, but ultimately come back down to earth in one piece. So I'll do a video on the use of the stooge and how to wind up a rubber motor using the stooge and all this stuff, and we'll watch this folding prop in action.